Most people spend their entire lives trying to feel in control of their relationships, their emotions, their future, while silently drowning in thoughts they can't escape. One text left unread, one unexpected silence, one moment of uncertainty, and suddenly the mind takes over. It spins stories, creates meaning, and convinces you that your peace depends on someone else's actions. But the truth is, it never did. The Buddha taught that suffering doesn't come from what others do to us. It comes from our attachment to how we think things should be. And the moment you understand that, something begins to shift. In today's video, we're going to dive into a kind of freedom that's always been yours. You've just been looking in the wrong direction. If your mind has ever felt like a prison, or your heart like it's held hostage by thoughts you can't silence, then stay with me. Every part of this conversation holds something your soul has been quietly waiting to hear. And if you find comfort in spaces like this, where ancient wisdom meets real, messy life, there's a simple, free favor I'd love you to consider. Just tap that subscribe button so you don't miss these conversations. Whatever you do, don't skip ahead. The part you most need might be just a few seconds away. Let's walk this path together. There's a certain kind of tiredness that sleep doesn't fix. It's not the kind that comes from work or physical effort. It's the heaviness you carry in your mind, the weight of unspoken thoughts, unanswered questions, and imagined conversations. It builds up quietly. One worry turns into 10. One memory opens the door to another. And before you know it, your inner world feels cluttered, loud, and exhausting. You could be sitting in silence, doing absolutely nothing, and still feel drained. Why? Because your thoughts are not resting. They're carrying stories, most of which aren't even true. Buddha taught that suffering begins not with what happens, but with what we think about what happens. The mind is powerful, but it's also untrained. Without awareness, it pulls us into illusion. One moment someone doesn't respond to a message, and the next your mind is replaying every possible mistake you've ever made, every reason they might be upset, every worst-case scenario you can imagine. And all of this happens without anything new actually taking place. It's just you, alone with your thoughts, creating a storm out of silence. This is what makes overthinking feel so heavy. You're not just thinking, you're attaching. You're gripping tight to possibilities, fears, and what-ifs, all of which live entirely in your imagination. The Buddha compared this to carrying a burning coal with the intention of throwing it at someone else. But who gets burned first? You do. Every thought you hold onto with fear or resistance adds another layer to your suffering. And the tragedy is, most of those thoughts don't reflect reality, they reflect your fear of losing control. When we carry these mental burdens, we also close ourselves off from the present moment. We're not here. We're caught in memories or expectations. And while we're busy living in our heads, we miss the life that's unfolding in front of us. Buddha emphasized mindfulness not just as a meditation practice, but as a way of living with less weight. When you bring your attention back to now, even for a breath, you set down one of those heavy stones. There's something strange that happens when we care deeply about someone or something. We begin to grip it, not just emotionally, but mentally too. We replay conversations, overanalyze what was said, imagine every possible future, and then try to control it all with our thoughts. But if you've ever tried to hold on to water by squeezing it, you know how that ends. It slips right through your fingers. The Buddha saw this human tendency thousands of years ago and called it upadana, clinging or grasping. He taught that it's not life itself that causes suffering. It's the way we cling to it that does. In Buddhism, freedom doesn't come from getting what you want or controlling every outcome. It comes from understanding the nature of reality and then releasing your need to fight it. The Buddha explained that everything is impermanent. People change, situations evolve, emotions rise and fall like waves in the ocean. And when you resist this natural rhythm, When you demand that something stays the same forever, you create your own suffering. The pain isn't just in what's happening, but in your refusal to let it be. You might think, but if I stop holding on, won't I lose what I love? That fear is what keeps so many of us stuck. But letting go doesn't mean giving up or not caring. It means loving with open hands. It means appreciating the beauty of a moment while it's here, without trying to force it to last forever. Think about how we treat sunsets. We don't try to grab them. We just sit quietly and let them unfold. That's what real peace looks like. The Buddhist path isn't about suppressing your feelings or pretending not to care. It's about seeing things clearly and choosing not to be ruled by them. It's about stepping off the roller coaster of constant mental noise and finding stillness in your own presence. The Buddha didn't promise a life without discomfort. He promised a way to move through discomfort without being consumed by it. It's a strange feeling, isn't it? That aching pull in your chest when someone crosses your mind again and again, no matter how hard you try to shift your focus. You tell yourself it's because you care. You replay their words, analyze their tone, question your actions. You feel responsible for the distance, for the silence, for holding everything together. It feels noble, even loving. But the truth is, not all mental attention is rooted in love. Sometimes it's rooted in fear. In Buddhism, the Buddha taught that attachment disguises itself in many forms, one of the most deceptive being the belief that clinging to someone is the same as loving them. Caring is open-handed, it's compassionate, kind, and peaceful. It honors the freedom of the other person and the peace of your own heart. Obsessing, on the other hand, is like gripping a flower too tightly. It crushes the very thing you're trying to protect. When you care for someone, you want them to be happy, even if it's not with you, even if they choose something you wouldn't. But when you obsess, you become attached to the outcome. You measure their actions against your expectations. You begin to feel anxious, restless, incomplete. It's no longer about their well-being, it's about easing your own discomfort. Think about this. When was the last time you truly felt at peace while overthinking about someone? Probably never. That's because obsessing doesn't come from love. It comes from the ego. It's the part of us that fears being forgotten, being unimportant, being unloved. Buddha once said, "You only lose what you cling to." And this kind of mental and emotional clinging doesn't protect a relationship. It poisons it. It robs you of the present moment, the joy of connection, and the lightness of genuine care. There's a split second between what happens and how you respond to it. A tiny, often unnoticed space that holds incredible power. Most people live their lives without ever realizing it exists. Someone says something that triggers them, and before they can even take a breath, they're reacting. A text doesn't arrive when expected, and the mind jumps into panic, replaying all the worst-case scenarios. It feels automatic, uncontrollable, but the Buddha taught that freedom isn't found in controlling others or the outside world. It's found in learning to master that small moment before you respond. Because in that moment, you get to decide whether you want to keep suffering or step into peace. We often underestimate just how much power lies in the act of simply pausing. Pausing doesn't mean avoiding. It doesn't mean you're weak, indifferent, or running away. It means you're strong enough to stop the old cycle from repeating. It means you're aware enough to catch yourself before your emotions sweep you away. Buddha said that mindfulness is the path to the deathless, meaning the path to a kind of clarity that isn't dictated by our impulses. That awareness begins the moment you stop and breathe before reacting. Let's be honest, when you're hurt, when you're afraid, when your pride feels bruised, your first reaction is usually not your best one. It's emotional, it's rushed, it's often something you end up regretting. But when you pause, even for just a few seconds, you create space, and that space is where wisdom enters. It's where you get to ask yourself, is this response rooted in fear or in peace? Is it going to help or just add more noise? That one breath, that one heartbeat of stillness can change everything. It's strange how something so small, like a delayed reply, a distant tone in someone's voice, or even a look that feels off, can send your mind spiraling. Before you know it, you're stuck in an emotional storm, questioning your worth, replaying the moment, and wondering what you did wrong. But here's the thing. It's not the situation itself that's hurting you. It's the story your mind tells about it. It's your expectations of how things should be that create the tension. The Buddha explained this clearly. We don't suffer because of the world. We suffer because of our attachment to the way we think the world should behave for us. When something doesn't go our way, when a person leaves, when a plan falls apart, or when we're misunderstood, it hits deep. Not because of the event alone, but because it clashes with the picture we built in our heads. We wanted the person to stay. We hoped the plan would succeed. We expected to be seen, heard, loved, understood. And when reality doesn't match that inner script, it hurts. The Buddha used a simple metaphor for this. He said, holding tightly to a rope causes more pain the harder you grip it. And yet we grip anyway, convinced that if we just hold on a little tighter, we can force things to return to what we wanted them to be. This is where the root of suffering lies, in resistance, in that deep, unconscious refusal to accept things as they are. We suffer because we argue with reality. We think, they shouldn't have said that, or this shouldn't be happening. But Buddha reminds us that reality doesn't bend to our opinions. Life continues flowing, indifferent to our expectations. Peace begins not when everything is perfect, but when we stop insisting that it has to be. There's something quietly powerful about the moment you stop fighting what isn't working. You know that feeling. The one where you've been holding on so tightly to a thought, a person or a situation, hoping it would change, hoping it would give you the peace you've been craving. But instead, all it gives you is tension. Your jaw is clenched, your chest feels heavy, and your mind won't stop racing. We think that if we just try harder, if we care more, if we figure out the right words or the perfect timing, things will finally make sense. But what if the peace you're searching for isn't on the other side of trying harder? What if it's waiting for you the moment you loosen your grip? Buddha often used the metaphor of the river to explain this. Life, he said, is like flowing water, always moving, always changing, always beyond our control. And yet we try to dam it with our expectations. We try to bottle it, force it, preserve it exactly the way we want it to be. But what happens when you try to hold water in your hands? The tighter you squeeze, the faster it slips through your fingers. It's not the water that's the problem, it's the grip. That's what overthinking is, trying to grip reality with your mind instead of allowing it to flow naturally through experience. Letting go doesn't mean you stop caring. It doesn't mean you become numb or indifferent. What it means is that you stop trying to control something that was never yours to control in the first place. You stop chasing someone's love. You stop rewriting the past in your head. You stop waiting for that one text message to determine your worth. You begin to trust, not because you have all the answers, but because you've finally realized that carrying the weight of everything is exhausting and unnecessary. You know that feeling when your head is so full. It feels like there's no room left to even breathe. Like your thoughts are stacked on top of each other. Unfinished conversations, what-ifs, regrets, fears. And it all just swirls together until you can't tell what's real and what's just your anxiety talking. That's not a flaw in you. It's what happens when we don't give the mind space to rest. The Buddha understood this well. He taught that just as the body needs nourishment, the mind needs emptiness, not in a lonely or hollow way, but in a spacious, peaceful way. A mind that's too full can't absorb anything new. It can't see clearly. It's like trying to pour tea into a cup that's already overflowing. It spills everywhere and nothing is truly received. That's how many of us live. We keep pouring more thoughts, more fears, more noise into an already overwhelmed mind. We chase clarity while clinging to clutter, and then we wonder why we can't find peace. But the solution isn't to think harder or analyze more. It's to create space. Buddha often spoke of this using nature. He compared the mind to a still lake. Only when the water is calm can we see our reflection. In the same way, only when our mind is clear can we truly see what matters, what is true, what needs to be done. But stillness doesn't come from silence alone. It comes from letting go of what's unnecessary. Letting go isn't forgetting or pretending things don't matter. It's deciding that your peace matters more than obsessing over every detail. It's realizing that not every thought deserves your attention. Not every emotion needs a response. Some things simply need space to pass. When we empty the mind, through breath, meditation, even a mindful pause, we create room for wisdom. We make space for joy, for insight, for compassion. That emptiness isn't emptiness at all. It's the most nourishing thing we can give ourselves. The Buddha taught that an uncluttered mind is the foundation of right thinking, right action, right living. Think about how many times you felt completely drained by the end of the day, and not because you ran a marathon or worked a double shift, but because your mind wouldn't stop running. You were caught in loops, replaying what someone said, worrying about what they didn't, wondering if you were enough, if you did too much or not enough. This kind of exhaustion isn't physical. It's emotional. It's mental. And most of the time it comes from giving your energy to people and situations that don't deserve to hold that much space in your life. The Buddha taught that peace is not something given to you by others. It arises when the mind is free from unnecessary grasping. So ask yourself honestly, where is your energy going? When you overthink about someone who hasn't reached out, when you analyze a conversation that ended hours ago, when you imagine worst-case scenarios that haven't even happened yet, you are spending your life in a place that isn't real. And what you spend your attention on, you feed, you nurture, you keep alive. That person who hurt you, they might be living their life without a second thought, while you're still carrying the weight of their actions in your mind. That relationship that ended, it might be over on the outside, but you've kept it alive through constant mental replay. And while you do that, you are handing over your peace, quietly, completely. Buddha often spoke of guarding the sense doors, meaning to be mindful of what you allow into your mental space. Not every thought deserves to stay. Not every person deserves a seat at the table of your attention. Your energy is sacred, it's not infinite, and every ounce you spend overthinking about someone who doesn't value your presence is energy you could have invested in healing, growing, or simply being at peace. We forget this sometimes. We think if we just think enough, we'll find closure, understanding, or control. But the mind isn't a container meant to be filled with explanations. It's meant to be clear, spacious, and aware. It's strange, isn't it? One small thought can change your entire day. You could be having a peaceful morning, sipping tea, listening to the birds, and suddenly a memory sneaks in. Something someone said weeks ago, or worse, something you wish you'd said but didn't. And just like that, your peace is gone. You're no longer in the moment. You're in your head, replaying scenes, analyzing emotions, trying to make sense of things that might not even matter anymore. That's the power of an unchecked mind. And yet, the Buddha gently reminded us, you are not your thoughts. The mind is an incredible tool, but it can also become your master if you're not careful. It speaks in your voice. It remembers everything you've ever felt, feared, or regretted, and it doesn't hesitate to bring it all up at the most inconvenient times. But here's the secret. The mind is not you. It's not your identity. It's not your soul. It's more like weather, sometimes calm, sometimes stormy, always changing. But the sky behind the weather, that's who you are. Still, spacious, untouched. The Buddha taught that our suffering is deeply rooted in the illusion that we are our minds. That when the mind is restless, we believe we are restless. When the mind feels rejected, we believe we are unworthy. But you are not the stories your mind tells. You are the awareness that sees the stories. You are the witness. And that shift, from being lost in thought to simply observing thought, is one of the most powerful moments on the path to awakening. You know that feeling when your mind just won't sit still, when it hops from one thought to the next, replaying the past, rehearsing the future, and never letting you truly rest. One moment you're remembering something someone said years ago, the next you're worrying about something that hasn't even happened yet. It's exhausting, and yet, most of us live in this state day after day without even realizing we're trapped in it. The Buddha described this as the monkey mind, a mind that leaps and spins and refuses to land. But he also taught that we are not powerless in the face of this chaos. We can train the mind. And the tool he offered us is simple: mindfulness. Mindfulness isn't some complicated practice reserved for monks or spiritual masters. It's as accessible as your next breath. It's the art of bringing your attention back to this moment, this breath, this body, this life. Because right here in the now, there's no story to spin. There's no memory to chase. There's no fear of what hasn't come yet. There's just you and your direct experience. And when you live from that place, even just for a moment, the noise begins to fade. Think of your mind like a glass of muddy water. If you keep stirring it, thought after thought, worry after worry, it stays cloudy. But if you let it sit, the mud begins to settle and the water clears. That's what mindfulness does. It helps you stop stirring the water so you can finally see things as they are. It doesn't make problems disappear, but it gives you the clarity to respond instead of react. It shows you that not every thought deserves your attention, not every worry is real, and not every feeling needs to be fixed. Sometimes we think the only way to find peace is to completely shut off our emotions, distance ourselves from people, or convince ourselves that we no longer care. And when that doesn't work, we swing to the other extreme. We overthink every message, cling to every word someone says, replay conversations on a loop, and try to read between every line. But here's the truth the Buddha understood deeply. Neither extreme brings freedom. Neither avoiding your feelings nor drowning in them will give you the clarity you're searching for. What you need is balance, a steady middle path that allows you to feel fully without being consumed. Buddhism teaches this middle way as a principle for everything, not just how we treat others, but how we treat our own minds. The Buddha discovered this after living a life of both extreme indulgence and severe self-denial. He realized that peace wasn't in starving the body or feeding every desire. It was in the space between the extremes, and that same wisdom applies to your thoughts and emotions. When you attach too tightly to someone, it causes suffering. But if you force yourself to let go completely and suppress what you feel, it creates a quiet kind of numbness that isn't peaceful either. You're not healing, you're just hiding. Think of your thoughts like a musical string. If it's too loose, it can't play a sound. If it's too tight, it snaps. But with just the right tension, it creates harmony. Your mind works the same way. When you hold space for your emotions without letting them overpower you, when you acknowledge your thoughts without becoming trapped by them, that's balance. That's where healing begins. You know what's strange? So many of us walk through life believing we're stuck. We tell ourselves stories like, "I can't move on," "I need closure," or "they owe me an explanation." We repeat these thoughts until they start to feel like facts. But they're not. They're just thoughts. Loud, emotional, persistent, but still just thoughts. And they create a prison we don't even realize we're living in. We decorate the walls with memories, justify the locks with logic, and wait for someone else to come along and hand us the key. But what if I told you the door has been open this whole time? Buddha often said that liberation comes not from changing the world around us, but from changing our relationship to our thoughts. The mind wants to believe that if we think just a little longer, we'll solve it. If we figure out what went wrong, if we understand why someone hurt us, if we get the answers we crave, then finally, we'll be free. But freedom doesn't come from knowing everything. It comes from realizing you don't need to. That aching desire for control, for certainty, for understanding, it's not the path to peace, it's the barrier to it. What holds us back isn't usually the pain itself, it's the way we hold on to it. It's the way we replay a conversation, trying to edit it into something we can live with. It's the way we wait for someone to make it right, not realizing that waiting is a choice too. Buddha taught that clinging is the root of suffering. When you cling to the past, to expectations, to people, you become a prisoner of your own mind. But the mind is not a jailer, it's a tool. And once you see that, you stop asking for the door to be opened. You simply walk through it. There's something incredibly powerful about realizing you can release someone without erasing them from your heart. Letting go doesn't mean turning your back on what you felt. It doesn't mean pretending that the connection never mattered. It simply means you are choosing peace over attachment. In Buddhism, the Buddha reminded us that clinging is what causes suffering, not love itself. So when someone leaves your life, or when a situation doesn't turn out the way you hoped, it's not the loss that hurts most. It's the tight grip you had on how things should have been. But when you learn to loosen that grip, you begin to breathe again. You make space for healing. So many people confuse letting go with giving up or with cold detachment. But that's not what Buddhism teaches. Non-attachment doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you care without clinging. You love without needing to possess. You value what was shared, but you no longer need it to continue in order to feel whole. It's like standing at the edge of a river watching a boat drift away. You can wave, you can smile, you can even feel sadness, but you don't have to jump in and try to swim after it. The Buddha taught that freedom isn't found in holding tightly, it's found in knowing when to release. There's also a quiet wisdom in understanding that some people are only meant to walk beside us for a short stretch of the path. Maybe they came to teach us something. Maybe we were meant to show them something, and maybe the most compassionate thing you can do for them and for yourself is to let them go with love instead of resistance. That way, there's no bitterness in your heart, there's no shame in your story, just acceptance, just peace. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do is release what weighs you down and trust that peace will rise in its place. You don't have to chase, cling, or control to feel whole. You just have to come back to yourself. Thank you for walking this path with us today. If this touched something in you, there's another video waiting right here that will guide you even deeper. And as always, thank you for being a part of this Buddhist journey. Most people don't realize they're trapped, not by the world outside, but by the thoughts they hold on to inside. You can look calm on the surface, doing all the right things, living the life that's expected of you, but deep down, you're exhausted from clinging to control, clinging to perfection, clinging to who you think you need to be in order to feel safe or loved. And the painful part? We think this is normal. But the Buddha taught something radically different, that suffering isn't just what happens to us, it's what we do with it. It's the attachment, the tight grip, the refusal to flow with the changes of life that keeps us stuck. And yet the moment you truly begin to let go, everything starts to shift. Not in the chaotic way we fear, but in the peaceful, grounded way we've been longing for all along. In today's video, we're diving into what letting go actually looks like. Not as a concept, but as a practice you can carry into your real life. This isn't just about philosophy. It's about finding the kind of freedom the Buddha spoke of. Freedom from the mind's noise, from overthinking, from the exhausting need to control everything. So if you've ever felt like peace is just out of reach, I promise you, what we're exploring today could be the shift you didn't know you needed. And if you appreciate the kind of work we're doing here, bringing you grounded, soul-level teachings rooted in Buddhist wisdom, there's a small, simple favor I'll ask of you. Just hit that subscribe button. And please don't skip any part of this video. Every section carries something meaningful, something that might speak directly to where you are right now. Let's walk this path together. You know that feeling when you're constantly double-checking, planning every outcome, or trying to make sure nothing ever goes wrong? We tell ourselves that if we can just stay one step ahead, if we can think it through enough, fix every flaw, anticipate every move, then we'll finally feel safe. But the truth is, the more we try to control everything, the more anxious and disconnected we become. We mistake control for security, but what it actually creates is tension, fear, and emotional exhaustion. The Buddha pointed this out over 2,500 years ago. What we're really chasing when we cling to control is a sense of certainty in an uncertain world. And because life is always changing, our grip only tightens as we try to resist the natural flow of things. Think about it. How many times have you worried yourself sick trying to control how someone thinks of you, how a situation unfolds, or how the future might play out? And how often did those worries give you peace? Probably never. The Buddha taught that clinging is the root of suffering, not because we shouldn't care, but because we care in a way that turns love into fear and ambition into anxiety. When we try to force life into our idea of how it should be, we're setting ourselves up to suffer the moment it doesn't go that way, which is often. Control promises peace, but delivers pressure. It's a false safety net that snaps the moment life dares to be life. In Buddhism, the practice of non-attachment isn't about giving up. It's about loosening the grip. It's about showing up fully while letting go of the illusion that you can manage every twist and turn. Because the tighter you hold on, the more you get dragged by what you can't change. And ironically, the moment you start to let go, things start falling into place. Not because you forced them, but because you made space for them. You allowed them to arrive, to grow, to move naturally. Peace doesn't come from gripping tighter, it comes from trusting more, not in a naive way, but in a deeply wise way, the kind the Buddha pointed to when he said that liberation begins not with control, but with understanding the nature of the mind and gently unhooking from what we thought we had to manage. When you release the illusion of control, what's left is something far more powerful: presence. And that's where your peace truly begins. We spend so much of our lives chasing stability, trying to hold everything together so we can finally feel safe. We overthink, overprepare, and overcontrol, believing that if we just manage every detail, we'll somehow prevent things from falling apart. But ironically, it's that very effort, the constant mental gripping, that wears us down the most. The Buddha understood this deeply. He didn't just talk about outer struggles, he spoke directly to the inner tension we carry, the tension that comes from trying to control what was never ours to control in the first place. And what he taught was this: peace doesn't come from getting everything right, it comes from letting go of the need to. Letting go isn't about giving up or becoming indifferent, it's about recognizing the truth of impermanence. Everything is always changing, our relationships, our bodies, our emotions, even our dreams. But when we cling to what we want to stay the same, we end up at war with life itself, and that war is exhausting. It's subtle, but relentless. We resist what is, hoping it will turn into what we think it should be. The Buddha called this tanha, or craving, and craving, he said, is the root of all suffering. When we attach our peace to outcomes, we give away our inner balance every time life doesn't follow our plan. But there's a shift that happens when you begin to let go, not with bitterness, but with wisdom. You begin to see that the things you were clinging to weren't giving you peace, they were just familiar. And familiarity isn't the same as freedom. When you let go, you stop forcing and start flowing. You become more like water, adaptable, open, and quietly powerful. The Buddha compared this to the stillness of a lake. When the wind stops, the water clears. In the same way, when we stop struggling against what is, the mind begins to settle. And it's in that stillness that true clarity rises, not from planning, but from presence. You begin to trust more, you breathe deeper, and even though life is still unpredictable, it doesn't feel threatening anymore, because now you're no longer trying to control the river, you're learning how to float. Letting go won't take all your problems away, but it will change the way you meet them, and sometimes that's all it takes to finally feel free. There's a moment on the path, usually after you've exhausted yourself trying to force things, that something deep inside whispers, "You don't have to keep doing this." It's not the voice of defeat, it's the voice of wisdom. We often think surrender means we're giving up, that we're being weak, or that we're letting life walk all over us. But the Buddha didn't see surrender that way. He saw it as one of the greatest strengths a person can develop, because to surrender doesn't mean to stop caring. It means to stop clinging. It means recognizing when the grip is doing more harm than good, and finally letting the current of life carry you instead of fighting the waves. When you've spent your whole life trying to control outcomes, people, your own emotions, you start to believe that peace is only possible when everything goes exactly the way you want it to. But that belief itself is the trap. It's what creates tension, anxiety, and burnout. The Buddha taught that the root of suffering is attachment, our unwillingness to accept the truth of impermanence and change. And surrender is the antidote. It's not passive, it's the most courageous thing you can do. To trust the unfolding of life even when you don't have all the answers, even when you don't feel ready. Think of the times you've tried to hold on to something, maybe a relationship, a job, a version of yourself, long after it had started to drift. That gripping, that pushing, that constant fear of losing, it didn't bring you peace, it brought you pressure. The moment you let go, really let go, something else begins to emerge. It's quiet, but powerful. It's the sense that you never needed to force anything to begin with. What's meant for you has a way of staying, and what's not will fall away no matter how tightly you hold it. Buddhist wisdom doesn't ask you to surrender your dreams. It asks you to surrender your attachment to how those dreams must unfold. It invites you to show up, to act with compassion and awareness, and then release the outcome. Not because you don't care, but because you trust something deeper than your fears. You trust the Dharma, the natural flow of life. And in that trust, you stop resisting the moment and you start waking up to its truth. That's when surrender becomes your superpower, not a sign of weakness, but the beginning of real freedom. There's something deeply frustrating about pouring your heart into something, whether it's a relationship, a dream, a goal, and feeling like the more effort you give, the further it slips away. It's like trying to hold water in your hands. The tighter you grip, the faster it escapes. We're taught that effort equals results, that intensity brings success. But the Buddha saw something else. He saw that when our effort is fueled by clinging, by desperation, fear, or ego, it backfires. And ironically, when we loosen that grip and let go of needing everything to go our way, life often flows more smoothly. That's the paradox of detachment. Detachment doesn't mean you stop caring. That's one of the biggest misunderstandings. It's not about being cold or distant or indifferent. In fact, it's the opposite. Detachment is what allows you to show up fully, with presence, with love, with intention, but without being imprisoned by the outcome. The Buddha taught that attachment is the root of suffering, because when we tie our identity or happiness to something impermanent, we create the conditions for pain. Nothing lasts forever. Not a job, not a feeling, not even the people we love. And when we resist this truth, we suffer. Detachment is our way of accepting impermanence without losing our peace. Think about how it feels when you're desperate for something to work. Every message that goes unanswered feels like rejection. Every delay feels personal. You start living in a state of emotional tension, always waiting for the external world to give you permission to feel okay. But when you practice detachment, you start moving from a different place. You take action because it feels true, not because it guarantees a reward. You speak your truth without trying to control how it's received. You love without demanding certainty. That's powerful. That's peaceful. The Buddha didn't ask us to stop dreaming or striving. He asked us to notice the suffering that arises when we crave certainty, when we resist change, when we try to force the river to flow our way. Detachment means trusting that you don't have to hold everything so tightly for it to stay. What's meant for you will stay. What's not will teach you. And when you let go of clinging to the result, you open yourself to the beauty of the moment, to the peace that doesn't come from control, but from connection with the present. That's where the real power lives. There's this strange thing we do when we're anxious or unsure. We start thinking more, believing that if we just think harder, longer, deeper, we'll finally figure it out. That one more mental spin will lead to peace. But it doesn't. It just makes us more tired. The Buddha referred to this restless activity of the mind as the monkey mind, always jumping, grasping, leaping from one worry to another. And here's the truth that most of us don't realize until we're completely drained. Overthinking doesn't solve the problem. It becomes the problem. We confuse overthinking with being productive. We think we're solving something when really we're just running in circles inside our own heads. You know that feeling. You're replaying a conversation, imagining all the worst-case outcomes, or endlessly trying to plan for something that hasn't even happened yet. But no matter how many angles you cover, it never brings clarity. It just brings more confusion, more noise, more pressure. And ironically, the more you think, the further away peace seems to be. It's like stirring muddy water. The more you stir, the cloudier it gets. The Buddha taught that the mind is a powerful tool, but only when it's trained. Without mindfulness, it becomes your master instead of your servant. Overthinking is the perfect example of this. It tricks you into believing that if you just keep going, you'll eventually break through. But insight doesn't come from chaos. It comes from stillness. And that stillness can't arise until you stop trying to control everything with your thoughts. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stop thinking and start breathing. Seriously, just breathe. Come back to your body. Feel your feet on the ground. Notice your breath moving in and out. These aren't distractions. They're gateways back to the present moment where peace actually lives. Because the truth is, peace was never in the answer you were trying to find. It was in the space you were too busy to notice. There was a time when one single thought could ruin my entire day. A quick passing doubt like, "You're falling behind," or "They probably don't like you," and suddenly I was spiraling. And I know I'm not alone in this. So many of us live like that, trapped in a mental echo chamber, believing everything the mind throws at us as if it were absolute truth. The Buddha saw this very clearly. He taught that the mind, when left untrained, becomes a source of suffering. It jumps from fear to fantasy, from regret to anxiety, and we follow it like it's our master. But here's the truth. Just because a thought appears in your mind doesn't mean it's real, and it certainly doesn't mean it's you. The Buddha compared the mind to a monkey, restless, noisy, always jumping from one branch of thought to another. And unless we step back and observe, we become the monkey without realizing it. But the moment you become the observer, everything starts to shift. You realize that thoughts are like clouds moving through the sky. They come, they go, they change shape. But the sky, the awareness behind those thoughts, remains untouched. That awareness, that's who you are. Not the storm, not the passing worry, not the negative voice that says you're not enough. You're the one witnessing it all. So many of our painful emotions come not from life itself, but from identifying with these passing mental stories. You don't suffer because the thought, "I'm not good enough" popped into your head. You suffer because you believed it, you gave it power. But what if, instead of reacting, you just watched it pass? What if you met it with kindness, with curiosity, and then let it go? Just like watching a leaf float down a river without needing to follow it? Mindfulness, as the Buddha taught, is the key to this freedom. When we become present, when we notice thoughts instead of getting pulled into them, we start to experience life differently. There's more space, more peace. You begin to realize that your mind will speak, but you don't have to obey. You're allowed to pause, breathe, and choose a different response. And in that space between thought and reaction, something incredible happens. You return to yourself, not the version shaped by fear or habit, but the quiet, steady awareness that was there all along. That's where your freedom lives, not by silencing the mind, but by no longer mistaking it for who you are. Sometimes the reason we feel overwhelmed isn't because life is too fast or too uncertain. It's because we're constantly trying to stay one step ahead of it. We're always planning, adjusting, managing outcomes. It's like trying to walk forward while looking 10 feet in front of you. You miss the ground beneath your feet. And yet, so much of our stress comes from exactly that, wanting the next thing to be perfect before we even take the first step. The Buddha taught that the present moment is the only true reality. The past is memory, the future is a projection. But right now, this breath, this step, is where life actually happens. The more we try to escape it, the more we disconnect from our own peace. When we stop trying to control the story and start listening to what the moment is asking of us, everything begins to soften. The tension in our minds, the pressure in our hearts, the gripping need to make everything go a certain way, all of it loosens. Life stops feeling like something we have to chase and starts feeling like something we can actually be part of. The Buddha encouraged mindfulness not just as a practice during meditation, but as a way of being. He taught that wisdom arises not from always knowing what to do next, but from paying full attention to what's here now. Sometimes that means letting go of your plans. Sometimes it means being still long enough to hear your own inner truth surface. There's a deep kind of intelligence in letting the moment lead. It doesn't mean giving up on your goals. It means surrendering the tight grip you have on how you think things have to unfold. You begin to trust the rhythm of life instead of fighting it. The truth is, some of your most meaningful moments won't happen because you forced them into place. They'll happen because you were open enough to receive them. Maybe not according to your timeline, but in exactly the way your soul needed. When you align yourself with the present moment, something powerful happens. You stop managing life like a to-do list, and you start living it as an experience. That's where peace lives. That's where clarity rises. That's where the path becomes clear, not by controlling it, but by being willing to walk it one conscious step at a time. There's a certain kind of heaviness that sneaks into your life when you start believing it's your job to fix everything for everyone. You feel it when someone you love is struggling and you rush to solve their pain before they even ask. You feel it at work when things fall apart and you jump in to patch the cracks, even though no one asked you to. It's subtle at first. It feels like being helpful, being responsible, being strong. But over time that weight grows. And without realizing it, you start carrying more than your share, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. You start believing that peace will only come when everything around you is in order. But the Buddha taught something so different. He taught that peace isn't something you earn through control. It's something you uncover when you stop clinging, especially to roles that were never yours to carry. We often confuse compassion with fixing. We think that love means stepping in, solving, saving. But Buddhism shows us a different kind of love, a quieter, wiser kind. It's the love that knows when to stay close without interfering. The love that can sit with someone in their mess without rushing to clean it up. The love that trusts another person's path, even when it's painful to watch. When we try to fix someone else's journey, we're not just carrying their pain, we're blocking their growth. We rob them of the lessons that come through struggle, through mistakes, through natural unfolding. The Buddha reminded us that each being walks their own path toward awakening. No one can do the inner work for another, and when we try to, we're not offering presence, we're offering pressure. That pressure doesn't just affect others, it consumes you, it builds resentment, burnout, frustration. You start wondering why no one helps you the way you help them. But the truth is you never gave them the space to. You tried to be the glue for everything and everyone, but forgot to hold space for yourself. The practice here isn't abandonment, it's awareness. Before you jump in to fix, pause and ask, is this truly mine to carry? What if my presence, not my solution, is the real medicine? The Buddha taught that clarity arises when the mind is still. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do is to step back, breathe, and trust that others are capable of walking through their own storm. You are not here to be everyone's anchor, you are here to be your own. And from that steady place, your presence alone becomes a quiet source of strength. We've been taught that if you're not constantly doing something, you're falling behind. That rest is laziness, and being still means you're unmotivated. But what if that belief is actually what's keeping you exhausted, anxious, and disconnected from yourself? What if your endless doing is the very thing clouding your clarity and draining your joy? The Buddha taught that peace doesn't come from doing more. It comes from knowing yourself deeply, and you can't know yourself when you're always running, fixing, striving. Sometimes the most transformative thing you can do is pause. The world constantly pressures us to hustle, to keep achieving, proving, improving. Even when you've done enough for the day, there's that little voice that whispers, do more, be better, stay ahead. But Buddhism invites us to look beneath that voice. Where is it coming from? Is it truth or is it conditioning? The Buddha understood that so much of our suffering comes from craving, wanting to be somewhere else, someone else, doing something else. So we overwork, we fill our days, we chase value through activity, but in the process we forget how to just be. Think of a lotus flower. It doesn't bloom by forcing itself open. It rises slowly from the mud, steady and unhurried, trusting the process. It simply allows. That's what the practice of mindfulness teaches us, to slow down enough to notice the life we're already living. When you let go of the need to constantly perform, you begin to discover the part of you that was never broken, never lacking, never in a rush. That's the part the Buddha pointed to again and again, the stillness within, the presence beneath the pressure. You don't have to do more to be enough. You don't have to hold it all together to be worthy of peace. Sometimes the most powerful act is simply letting go and returning to the quiet truth within you. Thank you for being here, for walking this path with presence and courage. If today's message spoke to your heart, I invite you to watch one of the videos on your screen. It might be exactly what your soul needs next. And as always, thank you for being a part of Buddhist Journey. Until we meet again, may you be still, may you be free, may you be at peace. Some thoughts don't visit us, they move in. They sit quietly in the corners of our mind, whispering stories that shape our mood, our choices, even our self-worth. One unanswered message, one unexpected silence, one moment where things didn't go the way we hoped, and suddenly we're consumed trying to read between lines that don't exist, trying to control outcomes that aren't ours to control. The Buddha taught that suffering isn't born from what happens to us. It comes from the way we cling to what we think should have happened. That grasping, that mental replay, is what keeps us stuck. But what if you could learn to let go without losing love? What if peace wasn't about changing the situation, but changing your relationship to it? That's what we're diving into today. If your mind has been louder than your heart lately, if you're tired of feeling held hostage by thoughts that just won't let you rest, then stay with me. Don't skip a second of this video. Somewhere in what we're about to explore, there might be a sentence, a breath, a moment that quietly unlocks a door you didn't realize you were trapped behind. And if you find value in these conversations, if something here speaks to your soul, there's one simple free favor I'd be grateful for. Hit the subscribe button. Let's walk this Buddhist path together. You're not alone. You're exactly where you need to be. It's strange how a single moment, just a few seconds, can take over your entire day. You might wake up feeling fine, clear-minded, even hopeful. But then something happens. A message is left unread. Someone walks past you without saying hello. A conversation feels slightly off. That's all it takes. And suddenly, your mind isn't here anymore. It's replaying, reanalyzing, reliving. You start wondering what you missed, what they meant, if something changed. You go through your day, but it feels like your thoughts are dragging a weight behind you. And even when everything around you is calm, inside feels stormy. That's not your fault. It's the nature of an untamed mind. The Buddha compared it to a wild elephant, powerful but directionless unless trained with patience, presence, and compassion. The thing is, the mind doesn't always wait for problems, it creates them. It takes a silence and turns it into a rejection. It takes a delay and turns it into a disaster. It builds entire stories from a single word or gesture, and then it asks you to live inside that story. This is the trap so many of us fall into. We don't just think, we attach. We attach meaning, we attach identity, we attach our self-worth to how others respond to us. Buddha's teaching on the Four Noble Truths reminds us that suffering begins with attachment, especially attachment to the way we believe things should be. And the more tightly we hold on to these shoulds, the more we suffer. But what if the thought didn't need to stay? What if it was just that, a thought? You are not your thoughts. You are the awareness that sees them. And the moment you remember that, even in the middle of mental noise, you've already taken the first step toward freedom. You know what's tricky about certain feelings? They disguise themselves as care, when really they're rooted in something else entirely. You think you're simply missing someone. You believe it's because you have a good heart, that you're just loyal, just deeply connected. But beneath the surface, it's not always love that keeps us holding on. Sometimes it's our attachment to how that person made us feel. You're not just thinking about them. You're thinking about the version of yourself that existed when they were near. The one who felt wanted, needed, important. And that right there is where the suffering begins. The Buddha taught that clinging is the root of all suffering, not just clinging to people, but to emotions, experiences, and the temporary highs that come with feeling seen. What we often chase is not the person, but the sensation we had in their presence. We confuse that emotional addiction with love. But love, real love, is free of chains. It doesn't need to be fed constantly. Attachment, though, that's a hungry ghost. It comes back again and again, wanting another hit of that emotional high. And when we don't get it, we feel empty, restless, unworthy. Think about it. How many times have you gone back to a memory not because it was joyful, but because it made you feel something powerful? That's the loop. And the more we revisit those feelings, the more tightly we bind ourselves to something that no longer exists. Buddhism invites us to return to what is real, not the echo of a feeling, not the story in our head, but the present moment. The breath, the awareness that we are already whole. You don't need to chase the past to feel alive. You just need to stop running from yourself. There's a quiet kind of heartbreak that comes not from being forgotten, but from realizing you were never truly seen. You thought you had a place in their life. You thought you mattered in ways they never said but always hinted at. You made room for them in your thoughts, in your days, in the little sacred spaces of your heart, and then without warning they stepped back. Not with cruelty, but with indifference. And that indifference cuts deeper than anger ever could. We don't just grieve for people. We grieve the meaning we gave to our place in their story. In Buddhism, the Buddha taught that our suffering often doesn't come from reality. It comes from illusion, the illusion that we're central to someone else's world. That is because we care deeply. They must too. That is because we remembered every word, every glance, every silence. They must have been doing the same. But this is where the ego softly sneaks in. It whispers, "You should be unforgettable. You should be the one they can't let go." And when we're not, it stings. Not because of them, but because our sense of self was tied to being special in their eyes. But the Buddha also taught that true peace doesn't come from being chosen by others. It comes from choosing ourselves. Over and over again. Even when they don't call. Even when they move on. Even when we're tempted to beg for their attention in the quiet corners of our thoughts. You don't need to be the main character in their story. You only need to be the compassionate witness in your own. When you stop waiting for someone else to see your worth, you finally begin to recognize it within. And that recognition, that self-honoring, is where real healing begins. That's where you return home. You know that feeling. You're lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, and suddenly you're having a full-blown conversation in your head with someone who isn't even there. You go over every word, every possible version of what you wish you had said, or what you hope they'll say. You craft arguments, apologies, explanations. You imagine them hearing you out, understanding you, maybe even finally seeing you the way you wanted to be seen. And yet nothing actually changes. You're still alone in the room, your thoughts spinning in circles. This is what the Buddha described as one of the traps of an untrained mind, constantly creating illusions, grasping at control where none exists. It's exhausting, not because you're weak, but because the mind is powerful, and without awareness, it starts to believe its own stories. In Buddhism, there's a deep understanding that the mind is both your greatest tool and your greatest trickster. This habit of rehearsing conversations isn't a sign that you care too much. It's a sign that your mind hasn't learned to rest, and the harder you try to think your way into peace, the further you get from it. Rehearsing doesn't bring closure, it brings more attachment. It keeps you locked in a version of the past or a fantasy about the future. But the Buddha taught that freedom isn't found in control, it's found in letting go. That doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop trying to fix what's already finished or predict what hasn't even begun. Peace doesn't come from delivering the perfect speech in your head. It comes from understanding that the only conversation you truly need to have, the one that can heal everything, is the quiet one you have with yourself in the present moment. And in that stillness, something softer and more honest than any mental rehearsal can finally speak. We all do this. We build quiet, invisible contracts in our minds. We expect someone to always text us back, to understand us without needing to explain, to be there in the way we imagine they should. And when they don't, when they act like they didn't get the memo, we feel disappointed, confused, even hurt. But here's the thing. We never told them the rules. We never said out loud, "Hey, when I'm struggling, I need you to check in," or "It means a lot to me when you remember the small things." We assumed. And in that silent expectation, we planted the seed of suffering. The Buddha taught that expectation is a subtle form of attachment. It's clinging to a version of reality that only exists in our own mind. The more we grip it, the more it hurts when it doesn't unfold the way we imagined. What makes this even trickier is that these expectations often come from a loving place. We care deeply. We're sensitive to connection. But that's exactly why it stings when someone doesn't meet the picture we've painted of them. Buddha never said don't love or don't hope. He said don't cling. He reminded us that life is ever-changing, people are evolving, and not everyone is walking through life aware of what we're silently asking from them. So if someone fails to meet your unspoken expectations, it's not necessarily a betrayal. It might just be a sign that you were holding on too tightly to an idea. And in that moment, instead of hardening or overthinking, maybe you can soften. Maybe you can remind yourself that peace doesn't come from others living up to the scripts in our mind. It comes from letting go of the script entirely and allowing life to be what it is. It's strange how we often believe that once we finally understand the truth, we'll feel better. We think clarity will bring relief. We imagine that if we can just figure out why someone acted the way they did, if we can just uncover the hidden meaning behind their silence or their change in behavior, then the pain will vanish. But the truth? The truth can cut deeper than the illusion ever did. The Buddha never promised that awakening would be easy. He simply promised that it would free us, and freedom at first often feels like loss. Because when the stories fall apart, so do the hopes we built on top of them. When you realize that someone didn't care as deeply as you did, it hurts. Not just because of what it says about them, but because of what it forces you to see about yourself, the way you gave, the way you held on, the way you tried to make it work. The ego resists this kind of clarity because it wants to protect you. It says, maybe they're just confused, or maybe it was your fault. It wants to wrap you back in the comfort of not knowing. But Buddhism teaches us that peace is not found in fantasy. It's found in meeting reality, as it is, with an open heart. This is why clarity feels heavy at first, because it doesn't just reveal what is, it removes what isn't. It strips away our imagined futures and the roles we assigned others in our minds. But once the ache settles, something else begins to rise. Lightness, stillness, a kind of quiet strength that says, now I can stop trying to fix what was never mine to fix. That's when healing truly begins. Not in the moment we know, but in the moment we accept. There's something deeply human about wanting to be remembered. It's not just about ego, it's about meaning. You pour your heart into someone, you share laughter, vulnerability, quiet moments. And when they're gone, there's a part of you that quietly hopes they still carry a piece of you. You wonder if your absence feels like anything to them. If a song, a scent, or a passing place brings your memory rushing back. The mind begins to chase those thoughts, creating stories. Maybe they miss me, or maybe they regret it. But the Buddha reminds us not to lose our peace trying to live inside someone else's thoughts. Because the truth is, their silence isn't a reflection of your worth, it's a reflection of their own journey. In Buddhism, we learn that clinging to being remembered is still clinging. It's a softer, more romantic version of attachment, but it's still a chain. The need to be significant in someone else's mind can quietly turn into suffering. Why? Because it gives your peace away. It makes your happiness dependent on something you can never control, another person's memory. Buddha taught that the path to freedom isn't about being remembered, it's about remembering yourself. It's about returning to who you are when no one is watching, when no one is applauding, when no one is choosing you. That version of you is already enough. People may forget, they may move on without closure or acknowledgement, but your worth was never stored in their memory. It was always right here, with you. Real peace begins when you no longer need to be someone else's lingering thought. You simply choose to be fully present in your own life. You choose to remember you. That is the most sacred remembering of all. There are moments when someone steps out of your life, maybe slowly, maybe all at once, and the silence they leave behind feels louder than anything they ever said. You start to wonder if you did something wrong, or if you could have done more to keep them close. It's human. We all feel that ache, that pull to reach back, to fix, to explain. But the Buddha taught that grasping, even in the name of love, creates suffering. Sometimes what feels like abandonment is actually space. And space, when seen through the eyes of wisdom, isn't emptiness. It's clarity, it's breath, It's the beginning of your return to yourself. The Buddha often spoke about noble solitude, not loneliness, not isolation, but a sacred stillness that allows you to hear your own heart again. When someone walks away, they might be making room for you to walk toward yourself, and as painful as that space can feel at first, it holds the potential for healing that connection with your own spirit. Most people fill that space with noise, chasing closure, chasing explanations, chasing what once was. But Buddhism invites us to pause. Do not rush in with distractions, to sit quietly with the discomfort and listen, not to the echoes of the past, but to the truth that's waiting underneath all the longing. Sometimes the most loving thing someone can do, intentionally or not, is leave. Because in their absence, you're finally forced to see the places where you abandoned yourself, trying to hold on to them. This isn't about blame, it's about awakening, and when you awaken, even heartbreak becomes holy. In their absence, you return to presence. In the stillness, you rediscover your strength. That's not a loss, it's a gift disguised as distance. A painful one, yes, but a gift nonetheless. There's a part of the mind that refuses to rest until it finds answers. It keeps digging, questioning, obsessing, not because the answers will bring peace, but because the ego believes that understanding will somehow undo the pain. But here's the truth the Buddha gently pointed to. Not all wounds are healed by knowing why. Some are healed by accepting that you may never know. The mind, when driven by ego, clings to control. It says, I need to know why they left. I need to understand what I did wrong. I need to know if they still think about me. But peace doesn't come from solving every mystery. It comes from no longer needing to. The ego whispers that if you stop searching, you're giving up. But Buddhism teaches that letting go is not defeat, it's wisdom. When the Buddha spoke of liberation, he wasn't talking about controlling everything in your life. He was talking about freeing yourself from the need to. The truth is, most people's actions have little to do with you. Their silence, their distance, their coldness, it's a reflection of their inner world, not your worth. But the ego makes everything personal, and that's where the suffering begins. Ask yourself this: has obsessing ever brought you clarity that actually gave you peace? Or has it only fed the fire? The mind convinces you that you're getting closer to freedom through thinking, but really you're tying more knots. Buddha said that freedom isn't found by clinging tighter, it's found by releasing gently. So the next time your thoughts race toward another question, another imagined explanation, pause. Ask yourself, will knowing this truly help me? Or is it just another way to stay attached? If it's just more noise, breathe, let go. Trust that not every question needs an answer. Some only need your permission to rest. Some days, we wait for peace like it's something that has to arrive from outside. We think maybe if the person apologizes, maybe if they come back, maybe if the situation finally resolves itself, then we'll feel better, we'll feel lighter, we'll feel free. But the Buddha never said peace comes from what happens out there. He taught that peace comes from within. And that teaching, while simple, changes everything. It means that you don't have to wait. You don't have to beg or hope for someone else to do something right in order for you to feel whole again. You can begin practicing peace, even while the chaos is still around you. It starts with noticing what you're feeding your mind. Are you replaying the same conversations, imagining new endings, trying to control what someone else thinks or feels? That's not peace. That's mental noise dressed up as care. Peace is quieter than that. It's softer. It comes in when you stop grasping at thoughts, when you stop fighting with what is. That doesn't mean you don't feel hurt. It means you learn to hold your pain without becoming it. The Buddha called this awareness, sati. It's a moment-to-moment recognition of what's happening within you, without judgment, without trying to escape. You don't need a perfect day to feel peace. You don't need closure or certainty or everything to go your way. What you need is the willingness to pause, to breathe, to look at your thoughts and gently say, "Not now. I'm choosing something else." You practice peace like you practice anything else, with patience. And slowly, what once felt like noise begins to quiet. What once felt heavy begins to lift. Because you're no longer waiting for peace to come, you're creating it, breath by breath, choice by choice, thought by thought. There's a kind of peace that doesn't announce itself. It doesn't come with fireworks or grand realizations. It arrives quietly, in a single breath, in a pause between one thought and the next. Most people never even notice it because they're too busy chasing the next distraction, the next explanation, the next emotional high. But that stillness, that space, is where everything changes. The Buddha spoke often about this space. He called it a doorway to wisdom. In that brief pause when the mind stops clinging to the past and stops reaching for the future, you meet reality as it truly is. No story, no judgment, just presence. And in presence, there is freedom. We're so used to the noise that silence feels strange. The constant mental chatter becomes our normal. But think about it. When have you ever felt truly at peace while overthinking? The mind will tell you that you need to think more, figure it out, find answers. But the Buddha reminds us that true clarity comes not from more thinking, but from seeing. And we can only truly see when the mind is still enough to notice. That pause, that space between thoughts, it's not empty. It's alive. It's spacious. It's healing. It might only last for a second at first. A breath. A blink. But the more you return to it, the more it expands. You'll begin to realize that you are not the thoughts. You are the awareness watching them come and go. Like clouds drifting across the sky, thoughts are temporary. But you are the sky. When you anchor yourself in that spacious awareness, the grip of the mind loosens. The suffering begins to fade. And in that quiet space, the truth begins to rise, not loud, not dramatic, just clear. And in Buddhism, that clarity is the beginning of awakening. We spend so much of our lives waiting for clarity, for closure, for someone else to give us permission to move forward. We tell ourselves, "I'll let go when they explain," or "I'll heal when I understand why they did what they did." But what if that moment never comes? What if the apology you're hoping for, the reason you're chasing, or the closure you crave never arrives? The Buddha taught that liberation doesn't come from the outside. It comes from within. You don't need anyone else to set you free. You have that power already, right here, in this moment, in this breath. You are not defined by how long you've held on. Maybe you've carried the weight of someone else's absence for months, maybe years. Maybe your mind has replayed the same memory so many times that it feels more real than the life unfolding around you. But it doesn't matter how long you've been walking in circles. What matters is that at any moment, you can stop. You can step off the path of suffering and start again. The Buddha often reminded his followers that each breath is a new beginning. You don't need a new year or a new relationship or a new chapter. You just need a new decision. I am ready to stop hurting myself with the past. The beauty of Buddhism is that it doesn't ask you to become someone else. It asks you to return to yourself, to stillness, to truth. You don't need to fight your thoughts. You don't need to erase your past. You just need to stop giving so much of your energy to what no longer serves you. Start again, not with force but with softness. The path to peace is always open, and you don't need anyone's permission to walk it. You don't have to carry what's been weighing you down. You don't need all the answers to find peace. Sometimes, the most powerful decision you'll ever make is to simply let go. Freedom isn't somewhere far away. It begins the moment you stop clinging. Thank you for being here, for choosing presence, and for walking this Buddhist journey with us. If today's message touched something in you, There's another video waiting on the screen that will take you even deeper. Your peace is always one breath away. Just keep walking gently.